You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. This is 12 Newsmakers.
Today we begin in earnest much needed steps toward getting a better deal for taxpayers and citizens of Hamilton County with respect to the massive investments and public investments that this county has made in the riverfront and in particular in the professional sports enterprises.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. For years, Hamilton County Commissioner Todd Portune has called for the Bengals and the county to renegotiate the stadium lease. Several months ago, he advanced the idea that the abysmal performance of the Bengals, 12 wins versus 36 losses since 2000, combined with the team's failure to take reasonable steps to become competitive, puts the team in what the State Department in another standoff might refer to as material breach of their lease agreement. The recitals section of the lease states that the agreement includes a statement that the new stadium was necessary to keep a competitive and viable team in Cincinnati. This breach, Portune argues, provides an opening to legally force the team back to the table. The county commissioners requested a legal opinion on the strategy from the county prosecutor's office. After months of waiting, Portune requested that the commission hire outside counsel. 10 days ago, that proposal died for lack of a second from either Commissioners John Dallin or Tom Nyer.
I believe this is a good policy direction for the Board of Commissioners to take, so I'm not going to even advance it with our prosecutor's office. So I just think the matter is best left to individuals to pursue as they feel inclined.
That resulted a few hours later in a press conference where Todd Portune announced a series of steps he was taking as a private citizen to press the issue forward. Those steps are part of what could be a longer path leading to a private lawsuit. To discuss the strategy, I am joined by Todd Portune, Hamilton County Commissioner, and Bob Furnier, an attorney with Furnier and Thomas. Welcome to Newsmakers. Todd, welcome back.
Dan, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome and Happy New Year.
And to you as well.
Let's be clear here. The purpose of this isn't first and foremost to get a better team on the field. The purpose is to renegotiate this contract, right?
Well, absolutely. The purpose is to get a much more equitable and fair deal that produces a true rate of return to the taxpayers and citizens of Hamilton County who have been incredibly generous to both the Cincinnati Bengals as well as this for-profit enterprise that we've come to know as the National Football League. And we're hopeful that in the process, of course, as we do that we get a more competitive product on the field. But the real issue from the standpoint of the lease and the lease arrangement and the failures and the breaches that are involved, those issues arise irrespective of questions of performance.
Bob, on a legal basis, for those of us who aren't lawyers, both of you are lawyers. For those of us who aren't lawyers, what's the legal claim here? I tried to state the fact that in the recitals section of the lease, which I understand is sort of a preamble, there's this statement made about competitive. But what is that enough? Is that the legal basis for this, or what? How would you put this in legal terms? What's the legal basis of this?
Not at all. That's not the. It's part of it, but the law implies in every contract good faith on the part of each party, and in a contract like this, where one party's profit depends primarily upon the actions of the other party, the court will imply a reasonable efforts clause. Let me give you an example. If you were to hire a literary agent to sell a book, and it was an exclusive deal, and the literary agent just never got around to calling anybody marketing the book, even if your contract said nothing about the particular efforts that the agent was supposed to undertake, the law would imply a reasonable efforts obligation upon the literary agent. Otherwise, you as a writer would never benefit. Same thing applies to the Bengals lease. The Bengals paid virtually nothing to build the stadium. They pay nothing to maintain it. They will pay nothing to renovate it. They pay no rent. They get all the revenues, and the only way that the county benefits is if the Bengals can put fans in the stands. And if the Bengals can't put fans in the stands, then the county does not get the direct and indirect benefits that everyone presumed that it would under the economic study that the Bengals and the county used to sell the stadium to the voters.
So reasonable effort is a key phrase here. And Todd, how do you prove that? How do you demonstrate that individual players, a Corey Dillon or a John Kitna or whoever, they're playing hard out there. Coaches, I don't have any doubt, are working hard. They work long hours. How do you prove a reasonable effort isn't being made?
Well, it's a question of objective criteria and objective evidence, and you present all of that ultimately to a fact finder if it gets to that point. And I want to caution to say that
we're going to talk about the immediate thing here first.
That's fine. But you present all of that to whoever the fact finder would be, ultimately, be it a judge or a jury. But you look at objective standards and criteria. Now, coaching staff, for example, a lot of talk this week about a change in the coaching staff. I think the coaches worked very hard this past year. But you look at what any other NFL franchise, the other 31 NFL cities, would they accept, first of all, the product that has appeared on the field over the past 12 years in their communities as being a competitive product? I think the answer very clearly is no. Do they operate their franchise from top to bottom, meaning upper management, scouting, front office personnel, hiring a general manager, et cetera, in a similar fashion? Would any other city accept that what is happening in Cincinnati as being best efforts and reasonable efforts to put a competitive product in all of its machinations on the field? No, they wouldn't. And so you start laying that kind of groundwork and that kind of objective evidence down there. I think that what the rest of the league does makes the case far more than anything else that we might have.
Now, let's be clear here. You took this to the county commissioners in your role as a county commissioner,
yes,
and said, let's pursue this as a county, as a government unit. They then referred the question to the Hamilton County prosecutor. What did the prosecutor's office ever say?
Well, the prosecutor's opinion and what they outlined to us is a protected and privileged attorney-client document.
In other words, you can't tell the public.
No, I can't. That privilege is held by the board as a body, and the board as a body is retaining the privilege. And I'm all for transparency in government, but I will say from the standpoint of legal strategies and the like, and especially dealing with the Bengals, I think we can all agree that the county has been out-lawyered by the Bengals from day one on this, and probably the last thing we want to do is to start disclosing legal advice and opinion.
Even more than that, though, does the prosecutor's office, from the beginning of this, did it have a conflict of interest? Was the prosecutor's office party to negotiating the contract to begin with?
Well, that gets to the second point in terms of why ultimately I made the decision to move on with this without the full support of the board. We need to find out whether the board was going to embrace moving forward one way or the other, and as you pointed out at the top of the show, they did not. But I believe very strongly that we needed to hire special counsel because of the fact that the prosecutor's office is so intimately involved in this, from negotiations to oversight to the amendments to the lease that have taken place since then. They've been parties and participants to that. They will be witnesses to the discussions.
So they could actually be witnesses.
They absolutely could, and they are, by virtue of that, conflicted out from being able to serve as attorneys on this.
Let's talk about the immediate situation, because you have not filed a taxpayer's lawsuit yet.
No, we have not.
But you have written letters both to Mike Brown and to Paul Tagliabue at the NFL office. In the immediate situation, Bob, what are you asking for?
The law allows us to seek documents prior to filing a lawsuit. It's called pre-filing discovery. So we've just asked for a number of documents in different categories, and I see you're about to ask me why I want particular documents. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to explain that.
Well,
but
it doesn't surprise me that you want all the documents that the Bengals have sent to the NFL since March 1996 about attendance, revenues, expenses, and operating profits. I'd ask for those too. That's pretty actually, I think that what you're asking for is fairly logical. But you're asking them to turn over what have been private documents, right?
Yes, we are.
and it's not my expectation that they will do that. The
Okay.
law requires us, ironically enough, to use reasonable efforts to secure these documents voluntarily before we can file what we are going to file, which is a petition for discovery. So this is a preliminary step required by law to discharge our reasonable efforts obligation to get these documents voluntarily from the team and from the league.
And how long do they have to comply with this or not?
We've given them 30 days.
30 days. The other thing that I find interesting about your proposal in here, Todd and Bob, is that the Bengals request that the league used what's called the G3 resolution, which came in after the Bengals stadium was built, but where the league now contributes some money to these efforts. Have you ever had, or do you know, has anybody ever had a formal conversation with either the league or the Bengals about requesting money before from this fund?
I don't know for a fact whether the Bengals or anyone on their behalf has raised that issue with the league before. We feel that this is one of the new elements that we have interjected into the discussion about this that needs to be pursued. And you correctly point out that came into being after the Bengals lease was executed and all the financing for Paul Brown Stadium was put in place. But the league now has this program where, in essence, the league is loaning league money to teams for stadium construction that in turn the teams then pay back out of revenues that they otherwise are sharing with the league. So it's not a hit to the team in terms of taking money away that they would otherwise apply to.
It's just moving money around.
It's moving from the left pocket of the league to the right pocket of the league, but it takes care of it. From a taxpayer's perspective, it is all new money. It replaces public debt, and it begins to address this huge financial inequity that we find ourselves in having supported these for-profit enterprises of both the Bengals and the National Football League.
How much money reasonably could Cincinnati expect from the league on this? How much money has the league given to other cities, or other teams?
Well, we don't know precisely because that gets to one of those areas of the private financing and discovery of the league. But what we have been able to discern, and really Bob has been able to discern through his efforts and that of his firm, Furnier and Thomas, has been some public records obtained both by the Green Bay Packers, which are the one publicly owned entity, and also some information that was released through the Al Davis litigation that just became available in 2001. And you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but I think $15 million that was made available to the Green Bay Packers on perhaps the low end, to as much as $150 million that was put on the table with respect to a potential other franchise.
Okay, I want to get at a couple of things real quickly here in the last few minutes. One is, if some change is not made, what's going to happen to the county's ability to meet the obligations on the bonds that have been issued to build Paul Brown Stadium and Great American Ballpark? How quickly are we in deep trouble?
Well, we're in very deep trouble. There are some recommendations that we just received from our financial managers on this that we have not yet acted on as a board, but assuming that we do, that'll tide us over for a couple of years. But as early as 2005, we start running in a deficit posture on the existing obligations, and a deficit posture that is as much as $5, $6, $7 million starting in 2005. And what that means in real terms is that the sales tax that was passed to underwrite all of this, to underwrite the cost of building two stadiums, the infrastructure for the banks, and the lease obligations to Reds and Bengals, that sales tax will be inadequate to cover the existing obligations, which means no money for the banks and finishing that off. And it also means that we can't pay off the existing obligations and the bonds and the lease commitments in the absence of dipping into our general fund or encroaching on the property tax rollback or revisiting the payments to the schools that was all a part of it.
Okay, so all of that has to be looked at.
All of that hits us front and center in 2005.
Realistically, you're asking the Bengals to turn over certain documents. Have you had to lay on the table what you would be satisfied with?
Well, we haven't exactly done that. We're inviting them to engage in a dialogue with us. We're very hopeful that we can have not only a constructive and a meaningful dialogue, but to try to resolve this issue by the Super Bowl. That's what we've outlined. Litigation is a means of last resort. I don't want to be in court, and Bob doesn't want to be in court. It's really not in anybody's interest to be in court, but there are material issues here, and there's too much at stake not to carry this forward to the end if we need to, but I much prefer a negotiated resolution.
One of the things I want to clarify, if you file a taxpayer's lawsuit, are you asking anything, this is something that's been asked to me, are you asking anything as Todd Portune for yourself? Will the Bengals pay you anything?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is
You're
solely
just
for the
asking
benefit
for
of
an
the county.
adjustment of the lease.
Absolutely. This is solely for the benefit of Hamilton County and Hamilton County's taxpayers.
If by January 27th the Bengals have not responded to your request for documents, no movement, no negotiations have started, will you file a lawsuit fairly quickly after that time?
Well,
will you move forward?
We'll take the immediate next step, which, as we have outlined here, would be filing the formal petition for discovery.
Okay.
That then brings in the arm of the court, at least, to order the disclosure of these documents, and then, depending upon what happens there, we either get to the next step or we have a negotiated resolution.
Okay, I'm out of time, but I got a feeling you two are going to be back because I don't think this is just going to disappear quickly. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Stay tuned. After the break, the effort to stem the tide of violence in the African American community.
We really do need a change in our neighborhoods. The violence, the selling of drugs, the prostitution, the police, everything is going all wrong.
When you lose 61 in 2001 and 60-something in 2002, that's 120 young black men gone. If you catch those who killed those and then lock them up, you put 120 in the ground, put another 60 or 70 in prison, we lose 170 brothers in 2 years. If we don't do something, 2003 won't be any better than 2002.
In an attempt to make 2003 different than 2001 and 2002 in poor black communities in greater Cincinnati, more than 20 groups have come together in the last week to form the Peace Down the Way Coalition. Welcome back. To discuss the strategy of the new coalition, I am joined this morning by two people. One, Victoria Straughn, who is a member and one of the leaders of the Concerned Citizens for Justice, and Damon Lynch III, the pastor of New Prospect Baptist Church and one of the leaders of the Cincinnati Black United Front. Right. Damon, welcome back to Newsmakers. Victoria, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Damon, why now? Why did this coalition come together at this point rather than, let's say, 6 months ago or a year ago? Why at this moment?
I think the first of the year, a lot of people make resolutions, try to make differences in their lives and differences in the community. The year ended. It ended on a sour note. There was another killing the last night of 2002. And we thought the first of the year would be a good time to roll out a moratorium. It actually, the planning for this, though, was months ago. I mean, what you saw happen on Wednesday and at the press conference didn't just happen overnight. There have been months of planning for this event and for this, more than an event, for this initiative. So it's been months in the planning.
Some people, I mean, it might be able to observe that in the collaborative agreement, there was a expectation that there would be community-based efforts to deal with the violence, and the mayor several weeks ago said he was unhappy that nothing had emerged yet. Was that somewhat the spark here?
Not at all. The greatest expectation in the collaborative was to change the behavior of the Cincinnati police. We filed the lawsuit because of police brutality.
Oh, I agree with that, but in the agreement there was also this other expectation.
Right, but that is in there, but this comes from the heart and spirit of the African American community, okay, because we love ourselves, we love our community, and this is something that would have been done and needs to be done with or without a collaborative.
Victoria mentioned over 20 organizations.
Yes.
What is it that brought these particular organizations to the table? What's the span of them? What's the reach? What connects these groups besides the desire and the goal?
Many of the groups that are listed on there, we're already familiar with each other, and we've already worked with each other on a number of initiatives. For example, the MOMS program and Empty, which is on there as well. These are organizations of mothers who have lost children to violence in general. So we've already worked with each other. We've already been talking about pulling together an initiative. I've walked the streets with some of these organizations, walked the street with Black United Front, and so it was only the right thing to do. It's just to pull this together.
And I mean, I know that people have been walking the streets. I know, Damon, I know you've been walking the streets. Concretely, what's going to happen now that hasn't happened up till this point?
Well, one, the unification here. That's a big piece of it, so that everybody can bring their expertise to the table and begin to put our minds together on where we need to go from here. Who's bringing what? Some of these organizations even involve programs that are free that we believe that many of the people in the community don't know. So it's going to be a combination of different groups, different individuals bringing their expertise to the table.
Damon,
right.
Same question.
And that's, Victoria gave the perfect answer. It's when you unify all of your efforts, everybody on this list of almost 40 groups possibly at this point, everybody's doing something, but we've never all come together. And the magnitude of the problem is so large now that it's going to take this kind of unified effort.
You know, one of the realities of this is a lot of the worst of the violence, the murders, a lot of the shootings, it's all around the drug situation. How do, I know the two of you, but I suspect a lot of these people who are involved in this, well-meaning, not inside the drug world, how do you stop that? How do you change that? Because that's really about organized crime or disorganized crime, depending on how you look at it.
Well, and it's around a lot of things. It's around the drug situation. It's around poverty situation. It's around the joblessness and hopelessness. There are so many things that feed into the crime that we're now seeing, and we need to address all of those. We have like 9 different areas that we have to address, economics and education and politics. And our goal is to bring all of our efforts and all those issues to the streets. These are things are happening on the streets and in homes, and that's where we have to be. We can't do it from agencies. We can't do it inside of churches. We have to bring all of that. The social justice work that Victoria and I do is also a major part of it. We will continue that fight as well, but we have to bring a hope to the streets. We bring our religious aspects to it. We have to change hearts and change lives. And we will be bringing everything to bear on these problems.
You know, one of the issues is the relationship to the police. What's the role of the Cincinnati police, in changing where the trajectory of where we've been going for the last 2 years?
Let me touch that, and I'll let Victoria talk on that. One of the things Cincinnati has learned, and everybody else has learned, police alone cannot do it. More cops is never the answer to crime on streets, and Cincinnati has been trying that. Other cities have, and we know that doesn't work. Strong, healthy communities abate crime. We have to build strong, healthy, viable communities. You can put 75 more cops on the street, 15 more behind the 75 more, and the numbers keep rising. And so it's the efforts of these people who have come together.
But will these people be able to change the is one of the things, of the many things you're doing, changing the relationship between the police and the people in poor black communities?
Well, that's the work of the collaborative.
And
yes.
that's the larger work of the
Right.
collaborative. Let me, a couple other things. What about ordinary black citizens out there who maybe don't live in the worst crime areas, may live in neighborhoods that aren't that touched by this, or out in the suburbs? What can they do?
Well, first of all, I think that all these communities are touched. All these communities are interwoven. And that's the first thing we had to recognize. We've got to look at who this affects. And many of the people who are dying on the streets do live in other communities. They don't all live in Over the Rhine and West End. So that's the first thing we've got to acknowledge. And when we're talking about crime in the streets, we're talking about overall crime. Rape is way too high.
Right.
Robbery's way too high. Assault's way too high.
Not just murder.
Not just murder.
Right.
So we hear about the murders, but if you look at some of the websites that have the crime statistics, crime is just way too high.
One last question. I've got only about 20 seconds left. What about ordinary whites? What should we be doing?
ordinary whites can join, but right now it's the African American community. They can help with the struggle, but it's led by us.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your efforts. Good luck with these, and if we can play a role in helping out, call me and we'll have you back.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.